Hey everyone, JagTagger93 back again with my last video about Sigil. Today we're going to be playing the hidden map, E5M9, and I'm going to be doing it on Ultraviolence. I have not played it on Ultraviolence yet. I've played the other maps on Ultraviolence. I already played through them on Hurt Me Plenty as well. You saw me do that, and I really stand by what I said earlier. My theory seems correct that Romero definitely wanted you to try this on Hurt Me Plenty first, and then if you're feeling up for it, Ultraviolence, and knowing where the secrets are, and knowing the maps and the best strategies to take with them makes Ultraviolence a lot more fair. There's still some dick moments. There's still some really cheesy moments as well, but there's a recurring theme in Sigil where Romero will give you a scenario or a situation that seems impossible or ridiculously hard, but there's a trick to it somewhere. And most experienced doomers will figure out the trick and be able to go on. Maybe with a little bit of trial and error, but you'll do it. But, you know, I'll give more of my complete thoughts a little later on after the hidden map. So, again, I'm not going to show you guys how to access it. We're just going to level skip right to it. But I will try on Ultraviolence. If it's too hard, I'll go down to Hurt Me Plenty. But I feel pretty confident after playing a bit of Sigil already on Ultraviolence. I think I know what I might be in store for here. Alright, now we're going to level skip right over to it. Alright, here we are, the Realm of Iblis. Now, this is my first time playing this map on any difficulty, so I'm going to do my best with this one. Hopefully it's not too cryptic as to where we're supposed to go, but I'll do my best to do this one. I'm not going to be talking a lot during this map as well. I will need to concentrate and get a feeling for where it's going. By the way, the guitar in the background, I'm using the Buckethead soundtrack again. That guitar is so on point. I remember what I said earlier about Buckethead being the replacement for Slash on the new Guns N' Roses. And Slash had a very melodic, is that the word? Melodic? A very bluesy style to the guitar, and you're hearing that well, that emotion. So I will shut up so you can hear the carnage and also hear the awesome guitar stylings of Buckethead. And so I can concentrate too, because goddamn, Ultraviolence. Let's go. Alright, we got blasted by a cyber demon there. I was not expecting that. I'm going to try this again, and good thing we saved kind of close to where we died. But good to know that's there now. Oh shoot. There was a soul sphere we missed earlier. I'm going to try and head back to that area and explore it a little more. Hopefully we can get it, because I think I need it now. But I remember on Ultraviolence on map 2, there's actually a cyber demon that'll come out, but you can avoid the cyber demon completely, or actually telefrag it actually, which is pretty cool. But so I'm willing to bet there's probably a similar trick to taking out this cyber demon. I'm not sure if it's telefragging, but you know, Romero is a smart map maker. I mean, say what you will about this map or this WAD pack, but the author... Oh, nice. Does this take us to... Yes, awesome. That's a save. But a good map maker communicates things to their players. So with that cyber demon appearing so early in map 2, but there's a way to take him out, that communicates to me, the player, that Romero's saying, hey Mike, oh, hey Jag, Mike is my real name, yeah. Anyway, hey Jag, if you see an obstacle that's seems a bit dicey, don't worry, there is some trick that you need to figure out or something around it. So I have confidence that Romero isn't being an absolute dick, just kind of a dick. Alright, I see the yellow door now. I think this wall here might be new. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're supposed to pop out of there and walk on this ledge. Even though I don't think we have the yellow key yet. The yellow key is over here. But it doesn't appear accessible because we got that wall up. I do see a corridor in the background there, but I don't think... Maybe I'm supposed to go through there and come around? But I don't know. I don't want to risk it because we don't have an environmental suit. At the same time, I'm not really keen on going to visit Mr. Cyberdemon again, but we might have to. Okay, I thought it might have been a situation like we had earlier, one of the levels where we didn't have a key, but we were still able to get to the door. We don't, but when I moved over here, these walls moved down, and okay, we've got switches here, so that may be good. We just have one wall we need to bring down, though. So I'm worried that, I mean, only one way to tell, but I'm worried that one switch may be a trap, and one actually may be the one we need to hit. But, you know, only one way to find out, right? Alright, and this is what I mean about Romero being kind of a... Oh, shit. Just when I'm about to... Wow, that was perfectly timed. But, okay, so here's what I mean about Romero being only kind of a dick, but in a good way. Not a complete dick. So, let's get that health kit again. That med kit. We're going to take some damage, but it's worth it. Yeah, we end up coming out with 43 instead of being in the 20s. But, okay, so what he could have done, if you want to be really mean, was not have these stairs come up for us. He could have just said, well, okay, great, you got the yellow key. Now you got to go visit Mr. Cyberdemon again. Walk all the way back and go back along the ledge and go to the door. But no, we got this stairs here for ease of access. I appreciate that. Alright, well, that was it. That hidden map wasn't too bad, but it wasn't too great either. I mean, I prefer maps that are hidden that offer something a bit unique in and of themselves. It's kind of like a reward for finding them. You know, for example, like Quake's E5M9, Ziggurat Vertigo, for example. Now, this hidden map was no means bad. I actually quite enjoyed the Cyberdemon Fortress set piece, and the Buckethead track that went to this map is actually my second favorite tune in the whole entire megawad. This map also had a pretty good length to it, and the progression psychology was pretty on point. Now, Sigil's maps do not hold your hand at all when it comes to where you're supposed to go, but every now and then it will give the player some hints. Here, where we had the Cyber Demon encounter, and we got to the top of the fortress, there were armor pickups along the walls, which are meant to signal to the player that they're supposed to sprint along the walls to progress, and do it quickly before the Cyber Demon's rockets find them. So it was pretty good. So, like I said, I'm going to get right into it and talk about my feelings about the entire megawad, all of Sigil. And you guys have stuck with me. You guys have watched me play on Hurt Me Plenty. I didn't record all the footage of me playing on Ultraviolence, but it's playing now, some of it. Because I think if I was to record all of it, it would be hours and hours. It was pretty tough. But as a whole, the progression was, for the most part, pretty good. Like I said earlier, Romero does not hold your hand at all about where to go. And I think some players are overly dependent on the map maker to practically spell out for you, go here, then go here, then go here. And some of these maps are pretty linear, some of them are pretty obvious, but others you can take multiple paths. And this is some classic map making at work, where the maps feel like Dungeon and Dragon maps, classic Dungeon and Dragon maps, where you have an entire dungeon in front of you, and yeah, there's multiple routes you can go. Some of them will actually lead to traps, some of them will lead to dead ends, and there's one or two routes that are probably the best to take. But through trial and error, you figure them out, or by paying attention to the little hints. And there are hints along the way that will help you out on your journey, especially in Ultraviolence. Now, there are some crusher traps in this megawad. Thankfully, crusher traps are kind of a bane. I hate them, but thankfully they're very short. The longest crusher section was actually in map 4, which is actually a puzzle, and it's actually pretty well done once you figure it out, where you're supposed to go and how you stop the platforms and so forth. And I really appreciate the small touches here and there as well, such as the crushers not actually crushing where the enemies are stationed. That kind of makes sense. The enemies will be camping there safely. And the broken teleporter, which stops them, I thought was pretty neat as well. Now, throughout the megawad, there are some smaller crushers in other areas of the wad to add a little bit more challenge to the player as they're strafing and firing at enemies, but it's not really much of a big deal at all. Gameplay-wise, this wad is, unless you play on Ultraviolence or, God forbid, Nightmare, it's pretty fair. It really is. Like I said, Romero doesn't hold your hand, but he gives you hints along the way. Some hints are more overt than others. Probably the most overt and clear hint he gives you about what to do are the switches that you're supposed to shoot at to progress. And thankfully, the switches texture never really changes throughout the entire megawad. It's usually just these eyes that are tucked somewhere. So if you're playing and you feel like you can't progress, keep an eye out for one of these eyes, and that's usually the trick, right? There's also a lot done here with enemy placement and sound, especially since there's no mouse look. So I often would be walking by and I would hear a rattle or screech of a lost soul. I don't see it directly in front of me, but since I'm hearing it, I can bet it's probably either directly below or directly above. Same with the cacodemons as well. So that would add to my alertness. I would back up to get a bigger scope on things, and lo and behold, I would see them. Now, most of the combat in this megawad is very confined. You fight enemies in a very linear sequence. And what that means is enemies will often come in masse in front of you. And strafing, for how confined a lot of these environments are, isn't entirely possible. You can just do it just enough sometimes to scrape by. But the linear style matched with the limited ammo on Ultraviolence makes the conga line tactic, as I call it, an absolute necessity when fighting multiple enemies. What the conga line tactic is if you have a very confined space in front of you, the enemies will file in, and you can engage them one-on-one. And sometimes it depends what enemies you got and how you want to engage them. But for example, if you have a pinky in front of the conga line with enemies behind them, you can whip out the chainsaw and just go to town on the pinky. Do it in measured though, and pay attention to what's happening behind him, and listen to the sound cues as well. Nothing's more annoying than downing an enemy right in front of you, and as it's dying, having a projectile pass right through it that you didn't see coming. But the conga line does work because it helps provoke monster infighting as well. Sometimes in more open areas, I will have a cacodemon and a pinky in this wad, and I would draw the pinky closer to me, wait for the cacodemon to fire, the cacodemon fire at the pinky, and that would make this encounter mean I have to use less ammo. The pinky has just taken some damage. If I'm lucky, it may even provoke some monster infighting, and I can ignore the pinky and the cacodemon a bit and focus on other enemies or run by them if I feel lucky. Now again, with the gameplay here, Romero, more often than not, will punish the player for avoiding enemies. If you run by enemies, sometimes it'll be in a section, actually oftentimes it'll be in a section where you will actually you have to fight them again and again, and it's better to take out an enemy if you have the ammo and health for it at the present than wait, because more often than not later in the map you may not have that luxury. Now, I did mention the limited ammo on Ultraviolence, but this really is not survival horror at all, as some have suggested. However, it is totally possible on Ultraviolence to be completely out of ammo and feel stuck. When that happens, backtrack for secrets and find more ammo. And just be smart with the ammo pickups and you'll be fine. Really, I mean, if you are, say, 5 bullets away from being full, don't grab a box of bullets, just remember where it is, right? Oftentimes, even on Hurry Plenty, just by playing and just being an experienced player, if I'm down 10 health points, I'm not going to grab a med kit. I'm fine at 90 with full armor. I'm good. You know, I may grab some health bonuses if I see them. I may grab a stim. You know, if I see a berserk pack but I'm near full, I don't really feel the need to grab it, especially if I got the ammunition. I'll just remember where the berserk pack is and get back to it. Actually, that was what I did in E5M9 map 2, where there was a berserk pack hidden at the very beginning of the map, but at the very beginning of that map, going after the first map, you're probably pretty good on health, so it's good to remember where that is, especially if you're playing in Ultraviolence and you got a cyber demon appearing as well. So there's a lot of emphasis on the shotgun with this map. Some people don't like that. Some people lament that using a shotgun on, say, like a Baron of Hell kind of grinds the pacing to a halt with the combat, and I kind of understand that. But at the same time, these are Doom 1 enemies. Most of the enemies here, you're fine using a shotgun on. You don't have to whip out a plasma rifle or a BFG. Save that for the Cyber Demon if you feel so inclined when you see him, or for the very end, which isn't necessary. I'll get into that in a bit. Or the Spider Mastermind as well. But there's really no reason to waste cells on certain enemies. Well, okay, I take that back. There were times in Ultraviolence where I had to use the BFG to clear out certain areas, especially with a very, very annoying, I think it's in, yeah, it is, it's map 7. Map 7 was probably the most annoying map for me to play towards the end. I hated the one section where you have this crevice of lava and it's packed full of lost souls and cacodemons, and there, at one point, I did have to use the BFG. I felt like I had to, just to clear out the area in front of me so I could progress more clearly along here. It was a tough slog. And that section, I'm sure there's probably some trick to clearing it with more ease, but dang. And then the section right after that, right before the exit, is pretty tough as well, with very little room to move. But you know what? It's the last section before the final map. It should be balls hard, right? And thankfully, there are no Doom 2 baddies in sight. Romero made it clear this was meant to feel like a progression up from E4, from Episode 4, Thy Flesh Consumed, and have it be harder, but only use Doom 1 assets, and I'm very thankful for that. So people complaining about the difficulty of this map, just imagine how much harder it would be if Romero had Archviles and Chain Gunners and Pain Elementals available here. And, he really did it. He just used Doom 1, so he showed a bit of restraint in that regard, and restraint usually is not one of Romero's strong points. He's a guy who very much likes going over the top with his projects and what he makes. But I find it very interesting how I've heard some people say, on one hand, that this map is, or this WAD pack is broken, unfair, and then on the other hand say, man, if only Romero used more assets, if he just put more into it, if he put in some Doom 2 stuff and Doom 2 enemies and weapons in here. I'm like, no, that's not the intention, and I'll get into that a little bit more a little later, but no, I mean, especially what I was just griping about with map 7 at the very end, where you have the 2 Barons of Hell guarding the exit there on Ultraviolence. On Hurry Plenty, I think it's just 1, but on Ultraviolence it's 2 with a couple shotgunners. Instead of the shotgunners and Barons of Hell up there, that section would be much more infuriating if you had Archviles up there, especially with no mouse look, and they can just peer down at you through the bars and just, while you're strafing, have fire flames coming up underneath you. So just really, really annoying section that could have been made a lot worse. Thankfully, though, like I said, most of the combat is linear, and more often than not, there are some exceptions, but more often than not, you are able to retreat. It's very rare, it does happen, but it's very rare that the exit will close off behind you. So there were times where I would go into an area that's just packed full of enemies, and I would just retreat a bit to a more open area and engage them one-on-one as they're coming out. And of course, use those corners as well for cover. Again, a lot of people don't believe this, especially newer players or people accustomed to new Doom. But classic Doom is very much a cover shooter. So, aesthetically, this megawad looks pretty good. It looks good, but it's a weird kind of good and silly. I mean, with Sigil, there's a deliberate, repeated use of satanic imagery again and again and again, just to remind you over and over again, you're in hell, you're in hell, you're in hell. And it's used so much and so over the top, all the inverted pentacles all over the place. It looks kind of silly, and I'm not really sure how to put this. It looks, in some areas, especially I noticed in map 1, when you look out, when you go to the hidden area and there's just this black terrain all around you except for the red lines and red pentacles, it just looks so edgelord and just so over the top and just so, what's the word for it? Not gaudy, but cheesy. It's cheesy in like what you would see with a 90s Doom wad, actually. Something I would expect from like a Doom maker back then. And that's kind of, I think, the intention here. This wad was meant to look like a set piece and not be something, modern. So it looks really cool in a very retro kind of campy way, which I appreciate. Now, that being said, there's plenty of jagged walls and textures here too that really add realism as well. And the lighting, for the most part, is pretty much well done in terms of realism. And what I mean is that areas where there's flickering lights often had candles or torches. I didn't really see too many instances of areas that were just lit just for the sake of being lit up. However, especially later on, some areas are just dark or just get dark just for the sake of difficulty. Thankfully, those areas are actually pretty short. Speaking of the aesthetics, the walls and floors are often decorated with corpses. And one thing that I found very interesting, and this is something that I would pick up on and really wonder about, and maybe not a lot of other players would care about, but I did, was a lot of the corpses I found were actually marine corpses, which, had me wondering. We just went to this layer of the Eternal Hotbox sent by Baphomet, and I'm seeing all these other Doom Space Marines all over, and I'm wondering what's that about. Were there other people in the company that went to Phobos that made it this far before Doom Guy did? I just wondered, what was their story? How did they end up here? Just little things like that. The enemy placement, for the most part, was pretty solid, especially with the ranged enemies. The ranged enemies often were in areas that would snipe at the player. They would be behind windows, and yes, it may feel a little cheap if you're not looking for them, especially with mouse look off, but it really wasn't that big of a deal as long as you're paying attention. They kept you on your toes. And Romero did show a bit of restraint. There were often, even on ultraviolence, pistol gun guys, the privates, in sniping positions. And they're just meant to poke at the player and let the player know, hey, you are being seen, yes, we can hit you. Romero could have easily had a harder hitting enemy in these areas instead of the pistol gunners, but no. Pistol gun guys just every now and then just poke at the player, wake them up, so for the rest of the map they're on their toes. So that's a nice touch there. And one other bizarre trope with this wad that a lot of people have picked up on, and it's not really a bad thing. Well, it kind of is bad, but at the same time it's okay. Well, let me get into it. The trope that a lot of people are hitting on is with this wad is often Romero would put a bunch of enemies right in front of the exit, and some people are complaining that that's unfair and you shouldn't have to fight all these enemies and blah 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 blah. And I agree, it is pretty bad. But I agree, you shouldn't have to fight all of them. More often than not, you could just run right by them. I think for most of the maps, except for the second to last one, sprinting right by the last couple enemies and heading right to the exit, not a problem. Very easy and just a smart thing to do. Again, Romero is able to punish the player very often with these maps for running by enemies, because the enemies will come back up one way or another, but at the end of the map, you're never going to see them again. So it makes no sense at all to waste bullets, shells, and rockets and cells on enemies that are just seconds away from just, you're never going to see him again. You just run right by him. So it's just so weird that that's there. I kind of see it as a new player trap, though, because I kind of understand how if you're not used to how the exits look, you may assume that that's not the exit. You may just assume it's a door and think you have to take on the enemies. But again, I mean, I remember when I was first trying out this map, I saw the door and I thought it was just a door. And I thought, okay, well, if I need to retreat, I'll just go to the door. But if I did that, the level would just end anyway. So it's just very odd with the enemies being put there. And one other odd trope as well, it's not necessarily bad though, this one, but odd, is the reliance on cyber demons on ultraviolence. Now, what's interesting is that the cyber demons on some of the maps are able to be telefragged. And if not, more often than not, you're able to right by them, but just keep on your toes. They really serve as a mechanic to force the player to make split-second decisions on their feet and react quickly, and I can appreciate that. Now, that was a bit about the enemy placement. The item placement, oh, by the way, there's some instances of enemies facing odd directions. Not too many, but some, and I was just like, okay, sure. But item placement, ultraviolence messes with it. Just be aware of that, okay? And it kind of hurts the balance of ultraviolence a bit, I think. I think really when people lament about the difficulty of Sigil, they're doing it on ultraviolence. And with ultraviolence, I noticed that stim packs often will replace medkits, and some weapons are purposely missing. Thankfully, a lot of the major weapons are still there, though, so the BFG is still able to be obtained very easily in its usual spot in E5M9, and it's also still hidden in map 6 as well. But some of the other items are just placed in some very bizarre locations. Now, what I immediately think of is the invulnerability sphere placed right on top of the exit in map 8. And I have absolutely no idea why. I mean, when you're on map 8, which is the final map, you've got the spider mastermind and the cyber demon. It's tempting to try and run by them to get more space, I suppose. And if you're running and you see the invulnerability sphere, you may think, oh cool, I'll grab that, I'll be invulnerable, then I can square up with both of them and have an easy time. But as soon as you grab the invulnerability sphere, the map's over. I have no idea why Romero put that invulnerability sphere right on top of the exit. It makes no sense. The only thing I could think of, and this kind of blends into one of my gripes with Sigil, which I'll get into a little more detail at the end, but the only thing I could think of is that it's purposely put there for flavor and story reasons. Now, we all remember how at the end of episode 1, when Doom Guy finishes up that last map of episode 1 and is ambushed in the dark by these enemies, and then you wake up in the shores of hell. I'm thinking maybe what happened at the end of episode 1 was teleporting to hell allowed a bunch of demons to grab you or attack you in the abyss as you're going from hell, or from reality to hell, as it were. And doing so from hell to back to reality, they call it reality, you know what I mean, the world or whatever, would allow the same kind of thing to happen unless you're invulnerable. Or maybe the invulnerability sphere is meant to symbolize resurrection or coming back to life. Or maybe it's there just to be as a means of protection for the teleportation process, which is what kills you at the end of episode 1. I don't know. Nothing explains it. Alright, and again, I'll get more into my gripes about flavor in a second, but really, Sigil is made with experienced players in mind, experienced Doom players in mind, a specific kind of player in mind. If you remember Thy Flesh Consumed, remember it well. If you remember the maps that were made in the 90s, and if you've been playing Doom mods for years, and you know what telefragging is, and you know how to use space, and you know how to provoke monster infighting, and for you, grabbing certain items over other items, and using specific weapons on certain enemies, and you're able to keep a mental tally in a busy room full of enemies of how much health certain enemies have based on how many times you hit them, based on with what weapons and where, then this is for you. And there's a lot of people like us. If you're not like that, you're going to have a hard time. Alright? and it's made for us. And it's not made to be a fun time for us. Oh no, Romero knows exactly the kind of player we are. It's kind of made to challenge us, and that's what Ultraviolence definitely does. And it's very challenging. Sometimes I'll even argue a bit dickish and unfair, but for the most part it's fun, especially between map 1 to map 4 are really the best parts of this. After map 4, things kind of start to things kind of start to get a little painful and not as much fun, but you know, it's fine. All the maps are not too big at all, and they don't wear out their welcome, so even the most painful experience is at least short-lived. Now, one of my biggest gripes with Sigil is the lack of flavor, and again, going back to my gripe about the invulnerability to spear on top of the exit. There's really, again, how should I put this? Some people play Doom for the gameplay, you know, for the 2D first-person bullet hell experience. Others play it for the story, and the lore, and the ambience and the mood. I know, and I'm the second part. I love Doom's story. I love the ambience. I love the dread. I love the mood to it. I love the aesthetics. You know, everything about that got me hooked as a kid, and I kept playing. And I was really hoping for more of that here, especially since it's being, you know, billed as an episode by the original creator in episode 5, explaining more about what happens to Doom Guy between episode 4 and Doom 2. And I was hoping for a bit more. At least a graphic or picture showing our hero at the end of episode 5. But no, we just got a text box. And the text box it's okay, but it doesn't go into too much detail. It doesn't, you don't learn anything new. Now, I'm all for not over-explaining things, especially don't over-explain Doom Guy. I like the mystery as to who he is, be it Blazkowicz, Decote, or Flint Taggart, whomever. I like that mystery. I don't like it being clearly pointed out what's happening and what's going on. I like the questions, but at the same time, I also would appreciate a little more attention to flavor and dressing. And with the Sigil, even if you are an experienced player, even when I said earlier about how, you've done, what telefragging is, you remember doing it way back in Quake on, at the end of the game, and you remember how hard Thy Flesh Consumed felt. And it still is challenging today, I would argue, too. But if you know exactly what I'm talking about, still just play this on Hurt Me Plenty. Do it. It's actually very fun in Hurt Me Plenty. It's not the most polished experience. There's a lot of problems with it, but you'll have fun. At least you should. And I got to be critical when I'm grading this one because this is made by the original creator. I probably would have to grade this as a B-, barely a B-. I came really close to calling this a C-level megawad, but I thought more about it and thought about how much fun I had with Hurt Me Plenty, and really it's just Ultraviolence, and not all of Ultraviolence, most of Ultraviolence is just fine, but parts of it just seem really janky. But I would say for its problems and the small glitches that appear here and there, not very often. For example, there was one where I hit a switch and I couldn't progress because the switch didn't trigger properly. I think that happened just like once. I think that was patch 2, actually. I think that Romero released another WAD that was patched that addressed that, I think. But anyway, I would give this a B-. I can see why people would call it disappointing, but disappointing does not mean bad at all. And here we get into it. The real meat and potatoes, I think, of a lot of people's arguments of how Romero charged for this megawad. And when you put a price tag on something, it's tempting to compare it to content that has been released for free over the years. And yes, I'll admit, this looks very dated. Heck, it would look dated 10 years ago. But it was not the intention to make something that would compare or compete with modern WADs. It was definitely made to look like something that was made in the 90s as a follow-up WAD to, Doom Episode 1, 2, and 3, and Thy Flesh Consumed Episode 4. Now, I'm hoping that this catches on. I'm hoping more people play it. And what I really, really would like, if we don't end up getting an additional episode to Quake, I would love an additional episode to Doom that's not a sequel but a prequel. One that uses more of the beta story ideas and the beta assets like the original rifle and bayonet. I would be all over and I would love. But I know I'm just a very odd person, I guess. And, for what Sigil is, it's fine. I don't have anything in the way of buyer's remorse with this one. But at the same time, I'd be lying if I said if it was a completely satisfying experience. There are much better megawads out there. And just to remind people of some of the better megawads that I've played and reviewed. Most recently was Legends of the Hidden Tech by the Doom Reports community. That one was pretty challenging, and that one had a hidden map done well. Right, I grabbed earlier about the hidden map in Sigil and it not being too satisfying or feeling very rewarding. But the hidden map in Legends of the Hidden Tech is very unique in of itself. It delivers a unique experience in of itself that's different than the rest of the WoD. At the same time, it delivers a very unique challenge too, but one that's very satisfying when you master it. And just the overall flavor and progression to Legends of the Hidden Tech is just amazing. Love it. It's a nice blend of gameplay and story. And one other one that was really good as well was I Hate My Neighbors by Anonimvio and chamelnoel. And that one was extremely challenging. Now, I would even argue in some parts, stupid challenging, maybe even a little too hard. There were times when I was playing that and I really wanted to tap out and just say, no, the heck with this. But no, it is doable. Definitely doable. And I think that megawads like that are necessary to play for people that complain that Sigil's too hard. I Hate My Neighbors also has some very unique encounters as well that are quirky and will make you laugh. So it's a very fun experience. And last but not least, Niccolo stoppani's Djinn, which, again, I absolutely love for its ambience and flavor and its progression. Not so much its progression of gameplay, but its progression of flavor, how it starts heavy on the Egyptian theme, but more and more goes into a more cosmic horror theme very gradually, and it's just beautifully done. So playing Sigil by the original maker and paying money for it, and again, I understand the money didn't all go to Romero. It was meant for, the people behind it, like, Buckethead who did the music and whatnot. I understand that, but, I paid for a B minus C plus megawad when there's A plus content out there that have been made and still being made by fans and the community. And this overall experience to Sigil is not one of disappointment, not one of high praise, but just one of renewed appreciation for the Doom community. And that's all I really have to say about it. Thank you everyone for watching. This is JagTaggart93, signing out.